cost of carbon, a carbon tax, a cap and trade system might be 15 years from now, and they have to factor that into the cost of that resource before they purchase it. And what that did is it immediately made wind and some of the other technologies immediately much more competitive when you had to factor in an $18, $20 a megawatt carbon cost on top of the actual cost that it took to generate that megawatt hour by coal. Anyway, this is what is an integrated resource plan. I probably should just went ahead to that instead of rambling on about it. These plans now, and I work in this area outside the legislature, each utility does this individually. And if you want to make a difference, even with Opalco, they have to do a minimal filing with the state, but they have to project what their growth is going to be and where they're going to get that power from. They have to have a public hearing on it usually. And if you want to make a difference in what your utility is buying, that's a chance for you to interject yourself into this process. And that's where you can go in and say, yeah, it maybe makes sense that Bonneville is going to be buying some more natural gas generation here in the next 10 years, but we'd rather have more solar electricity here in San Juan County. And even if we have to pay a little bit more for that, we think that's a better choice. That's where you can interject yourself into this discussion. And it's important that people do that because, particularly here, Opalco's got board of directors, they're elected by the consumers that own the company. And when you show up and have a dialogue like that, it'll make an impact. I've been really surprised in the PUD area, public utility districts, that tend to be a bit more, run like a large corporation than a co-op does. The amount of people that showed up actually for the public hearing on these plans and were demanding more renewable resources being generated locally, and it made an impact on some of these plans. What I do in my other job is I mentioned that all these plans are done individually, utility by utility. I actually roll them up for the entire Northwest region, including Western Canada, into a regional document. And this is maybe one cycle out of date because I haven't juggled my slides yet. But when you roll up all those plans right now in the Northwest region, and that would be basically the 5 Northwest states, Alberta, British Columbia, and Saskatchewan. This is what they're saying they're going to be purchasing basically between now and 2025. And just to let you know what some of these are, that's a single cycle turbine, that's a gas turbine with one turbine on it. This is a combined cycle turbine, which are actually very efficient turbines. This pulverized coal actually was some plants that were scheduled over in Montana. But one of the reasons I wanted to show this slide, and I've got another one that's coming up that's more demonstrative, is that when you think about all the things that people are talking about now for energy, almost all that stuff is coming up in this section right here. And transmission is a huge issue when it comes to access to renewables, but one of the challenges coming up is how you firm all these different intermittent resources so that the lights don't, basically go out. And I'm going to talk more about that in a second, but I like showing this just because it gives people an idea about, and this is all new generation to accommodate growth in the region. This is an existing generation. This is what's going to be added.
The percentage that's nuclear, in years past, was it larger than that?
No, that's actually, that's been kind of a growing number.
So that's the nuclear industry's contribution to the total power in the Pacific Northwest.
This is not existing. This is not existing generation. This is projected additions between now and 2025. And the reason you're starting to see more nuclear show up is basically because there's a lot of climate change legislation that's coming out. When they take a look at the carbon risk, because there's not a cost, I don't think they've factored in the disposal cost, but the newer reactors, what they call the 4th gen reactors, don't have nearly the spent fuel output that the 3rd generation reactors do. So these are smaller 40, 60 megawatt plants. They're called pebble bed reactors. They run them for 30 years and they never do a fuel swap out, and they retire the entire plant at the end of the 30 years.
Where to?
Well, that's the question.
See, I grew up in Eastern Washington.
Yeah.
Born here in '56, and kind of it's surprising to me that what nuclear has to contribute here for the billions of dollars that Washington State taxpayers have paid over that long term. If we could use that as a motivator, that investment to motivate people into solar and just look what we spent on nuclear, we actually spent.
Right.
Look what we might have to spend to get that pie bigger for solar. And
yeah,
it wouldn't be such a shock to them if they knew how much money it already is.
This number here, I can tell you, is being driven by two things right now. One is there's a test reactor being scheduled for Idaho Falls in 2012. And it's going to be a 10 megawatt reactor, but it's the first one the US government's going to build of this new generation reactors. I can tell you China's building 30 of them a year right now, which is for them is a very slow clip because they're building 30 coal plants a month right now. But the other thing that's pushing this is that I think the first reactor is probably going to go in up at the oil sands up in Alberta because they have a real need for steam up there. And they've gone through 4 different fuel types to generate that steam. They've gone from natural gas, and then the market price went up. They said, well, it costs too much, and then they were going to do a derivative out of what they call bitumen, which is the name of the crude that comes out of the sands up there. And then that the price of oil went up to $70 a barrel, and they said, no, we can't afford that. And they kind of keep coming back around to nuclear. So I think you're probably going to see the first plant coming up in the very northern part of Alberta up there. They need about 5,000 megawatt hours of steam to extract oil, and they do a thing called the steam actuated gravitation process, which is they, instead of doing big strip mines, they drill pipes and they inject steam down in, which loosens up the oil, and it drains into a pipe below it, and they suck it back up out of the ground, basically. And it is actually compared to the land, the strip mines is a bit more friendlier process than what they're doing up there with the strip mines, which is I've been up there 5 or 6 times, and it just blows my mind every time. I mean, the thing is up there is that the hole's so big, and there's nothing to compare it to, that you really have no idea, the size of it. I mean, a Mount Rainier was sitting behind it to give you some sort of height depth perspective, but it's just prairie for miles and miles and miles. So, the steam process is cleaner, and that's where that nuclear number is being driven out of. Is that keeps popping up there as a way to make steam for that process. This is by year, and I just want to show you this because it kind of goes into some of the regional challenges. But in particular, so this is megawatts up and out by year. But one of the key things for some of the large utility scale renewables is the lack of transmission to reach renewable sites. And one of the challenges we're facing is that this blue here, orange actually, you see this line here? Those are all sequence before wind coming online. If the transmission is not built, then the wind projects aren't going to be available for the marketplace, and they'll fall back to natural gas turbines because they're easier to locate near load centers. And so transmission is really a huge issue for accessing geothermal, some of the better wind areas and so forth, it's very, very difficult to site transmission. One of the other things we're looking at is I talked about those boutique standards. And this is a huge issue that we just started talking about last year, but these are the individual goals of the states in the West, kind of by year. And before you start thinking this is a low number, it's not always an apples and apples comparison. So our goal is 15% by 2020, but that 15% is of much fewer resources than what qualifies in some of these other standards. So Oregon has 20%, but they qualify hydro below 30 megawatts, new hydro, and we don't qualify any hydro in our standards. So that's a huge difference in what's available to the marketplace, basically. And the reason this is an issue is that currently these are the target by law, those individual states, of what has to be accomplished, and these are the actual number of projects in the pipeline at any stage, announced, broken ground, trying to get permits. So you can see there's a huge gap here between what by law they have to have by these dates and what's actually anywhere in the pipeline. And the fear here, my fear, is that when you get this type of shortage between